Hello everybody and welcome to the live event. I just can't tell you how excited I am that you've all been able to make it and take the time to come and join us to talk about the human condition and to talk more about the exciting transformation of yourself and the rest of the world that the understanding makes possible. I mean, I know that the excitement can make people, especially new people, to this, it can be a bit off-putting, but I can honestly say it truly is as exciting as we're saying it is. When you start to realise that every single problem on Earth all comes back to this one issue, the human condition, and when you solve that one single problem, that is causing all the rest and is causing all the suffering on Earth, it is just the most fabulous, exciting time to be alive and to get involved with. So, I know from experience, my own personal experience, that getting into the human condition, starting your journey to understand it is, it can be difficult to start with. Because, the truth is, it's like trying to start studying a subject that we've been trying to perfect, avoiding for the vast majority of our lives. We've been avoiding it so much, we didn't even sort of know that the issue exists. So it's very new for us, the human condition, and it can be, difficult to start with, and the truth is we are actually incredibly scared and incredibly sort of it's been an incredible off-limit subject, the human condition. It turns out though that the human condition doesn't have to be a scary subject anymore. We've got the answer for it. We've got a rational, biological, just logical, straight up science, scientific understanding that we can now understand, make sense of, and that we can apply to our lives and the world around us. It provides us an unbelievably, solid structure and framework that we can finally understand the world, rather than it being a mad sort of crazy, scary mess. But the fact, and certainly, even though the human condition can be massively confronting, and it provides a huge sort of new paradigm that it opens up in front of us. The real point is that it makes the explanation of the human condition no less true and also no less exciting. It just means that we've got to take a little bit more time, a little bit more care, have more patience, a bit of perseverance, and sort of overall more empathy with ourselves. We just need to look after ourselves. This information is here. It's rational. It's easy to understand, but we've just got to learn the understanding and work our way through it. The core issue that we're dealing with is basically, why, when all the ideals in life are to be loving and cooperative and selfless, why aren't humans? Why are we so sort of, destructive and egocentric and selfish that human life has become just about unbearable and we've basically just about destroyed the planet. In plain talk sort of think, how can a species full of rapists, murderers, pedophiles, racists, we watch unbelievable pornography or perversion or violence or dishonesty. It's all on TV, and we do it for entertainment. What's wrong with us? How do we explain this? That's the human condition. Why are we like this? And that's the point. We've finally got there's a reason why we're like this. And it turns out there's a heroic reason, a responsible reason. 2 million years ago, we developed a fully conscious thinking mind. And that meant we had to embark on this journey that we need to find understanding for our fully conscious thinking mind. And that journey necessarily messed us up badly. But finally, after 2 million years of search, we're finally at the point where we can understand ourselves. We've got the understanding. And that's what Jeremy Griffith has put together in his biological explanation. We've finally got an explanation of redeeming first principle-based biological understanding of why we've been so ruthless and destructive and uncaring. And the key to this whole situation is that we can finally understand and know in ourselves that we are not bad. We're actually good. We're actually the heroes of the whole story of life on Earth. And it's not condoning our upset or our terrible behaviour. It's just explaining that it was unavoidable, but that we can now understand it and it can now end. And that, in truth, is unbelievably exciting. So anyway, what we're going to do today is we're going to watch Jeremy doing a video which he did a couple of years ago with a few members of the public, and he's talking them through his explanation of the human condition. And he's just talking about why the human condition has been such an off-limits subject. And he talks about basically the way that humans have sort of dealt with it, or actually not dealt with it up until now, because it's been such an off-limits subject and because we've been so scared about it, we've had to block it out. And we've used this sort of, we've blocked it out, and in the most sort of significant psychological event in all our lives. Jeremy calls it resignation. And so he's going to explain, the human condition and take you through some members of the public in front of you. And all I can say is that watching Jeremy explain the human condition is, he just explains it with such ease and such empathy and such compassion, but it is incredibly honest. But it's now safe to discuss the human condition, and so I really hope you get heaps out of watching this video, because I know it's absolutely magnificent. And we've just got a few WTM members from around the world. We've got Susan and Tony from the WTM Centre in Sydney. We've got Alex from WTM Melbourne, Norma from WTM Bregenz in Austria, and Colleen from WTM Ballarat. And after we watch the video, we're just going to have a bit of a discussion and answer any questions or whatever comes up from over the time. The video is going to go for about an hour. So any questions you've got, put it in the chat or email us at info@worldtransformation.com. So please enjoy Jeremy.
So I'm the author of the book. I'm a biologist, Australian biologist. But interestingly, at the top of the book here, Professor Harry Prosen, who's the former president of the Canadian Psychiatric Association, so he's one of the world's leading psychiatrists, says, this is the book that saves the world. So this is a big claim. And on the back, in explanation of that, he said, this book takes humanity from a state of bewilderment about the nature of human behaviour to a state of profound understanding of our lives. And that this understanding of human behaviour is so wonderfully relieving, it will drain away all the pain, suffering, confusion and conflict from the world. And that's why I've said it's the book that saves the world. So that's a pretty amazing statement for one of the world's leading psychiatrists. The premise of the book, as Professor Prosen said, is to explain human behaviour, finally make it understandable, make our lives, ourselves understandable from the deepest level. Okay, because there's this massive issue about humans. We're capable, all getting good at saving a kitten up a tree, but then molesting children and diving into a raging stream to save a distressed person, but then kill people in wars. And it's just the paradox of the human situation is just undeniable. It's just the madness out there of it all. And we're reaching sort of end game where we need a deeper analysis of the human situation. And that's what this professor is saying this book does. It provides that deeper analysis. This is the book that saves the world. And he explains on the back because it goes into this dark corner and makes sense of it, okay? The purpose of these focus groups is to first of all get people's reaction to it, give them a free look at it, then have a reaction to it, then try and talk about this whole subject of the human condition, right? And supposedly familiarise you to it. The problem is that it's what I call the death effect problem when you start talking about the human condition. It's a very difficult subject. I mean, you could be studying higher physics or higher mathematics or something and that'll give you a headache. But there's really nothing as daunting as the issue of us, ourselves, the human condition. So that's what I want to talk about. All human behaviour is actually driven by or influenced by our fear of the human condition. So this book's going to present the explanation of human behaviour that is transforming. It's so effectively insightful and profound. But that explanation is based on our fear of the human condition. Now the problem is when I start talking about the human condition, in order to explain our behaviour, the human mind blocks it out. So I'm in this catch-22. How do I... It's like if I had a tribe of people and they all suffered from snake phobia or something, and I'd written a book that explains how they can solve their snake phobia, right? And I mean, they don't know they've got snake phobia. And even when I say, look, well, why don't you go outside? You know, why are you always living indoors? And they said, oh, no, that's because I like carpets and I like square walls and I like doorways. And in fact, you know, going through doorways is what made humans stand upright. They've got all these theories based on this dishonest world they're living in. And so, you know, so I'm trying then to get them to read this book about their snake phobia. So I've got to introduce them to their snake phobia. Otherwise, they just won't be able to hear what I'm saying. So I write this book about, so I put a picture of a snake here, right? And so I supposedly put a book in front of them, so then they pick it up. So this is going to clear their snake phobia. So they look, oh, I'm not going to read that, right? And when they do start to read it, they have the death effect response. You know, I'm not going to read that. They can't. And so I'm sort of stranded. How do I get them to become aware that, in fact, this really does exist, this problem of the death effect, and how then to solve it? There are two ways to solve it, is to have someone talk about it and familiarise them about it, which is what I'm going to do now, and secondly is to reread it and be patient with it, because it will start to clear, the fog will start to lift, and you'll be astonished just how much deafness there is when you start to read about this historically forbidden realm of the human condition. So I have to overcome the death effects. I have to connect people with what this reaction is that's going on in their mind, so they can start to become aware of it. And not only that, sort of erode that death effect through talking about it. And supposedly that will reassure you about this subject area, and your subconscious mind will be reassured and be more relaxed and be able to take it in when it couldn't the first time. So if you go to this book's website, bookthasavestheworld.com, you will see a video there of like I'm talking to Brian Carlton, the radio announcer, 2MMM, you know, he's called the Spoon Man. And he read one of my books years ago, and it really helped him enormously. And he talks about that and how he suffered from this death effect problem, and how it took a while to get through it. And when he did, he had this. He said, "You never forget the euphoric moment when you get when you discover, that this really does explain the human condition." And he said it's just the most euphoric moment, so it's very real. Like, he wasn't accessing; he was reading it but not hearing it. He wasn't accessing it. And then when he got to a point where he wrote it enough and could then really start absorbing it, hearing it, then he got incredibly excited. I mean, so much so you'll hear him say, "Oh, I had to talk to on radio." He's on radio for years. He's like our Wolfman Jack, you know. And Brian said, "I have to talk to readers, and can't see them, and I've got to talk to them very quickly and assess who they are." And said, "This understanding has been so helpful. It makes the world transparent. I can finally see why people are the way they are, make sense of us. So much like it just changed the whole world when someone finally can explain the riddle of human nature, why we are the way we are. And what I'm saying is why we are the way we are is greatly influenced by our fear of the human condition. So I've got to connect the reader to the human condition. That's my dilemma, how to do that. So now I want to make you aware just how real this denial is, this block-out is. There's a much better analogy than the snake phobia one, and that comes from Plato. Now, Plato is regarded as the greatest philosopher of all time, and he lived some 360 years before Christ, so that's a long time ago in the golden age of Greece. So he must be pretty amazing. I mean, Alfred North Whitehead, himself one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, described the whole of philosophy, which is the study of truth's underlying reality, as all being nothing but a footnote to Plato. So that's an amazing statement. So Plato was that profound and effective thinker about the truths underlying all reality. Is an amazing thing. So what the great question should be in our minds, I think, is well, what the hell was did Plato write or say that was so damn profound that make everything ever since a whole lot of footnotes to everything he wrote? It's a very interesting question. Well, the most revered work of Plato is the Republic, the dialogue of the Republic. Now, at the centre of the Republic is this analogy of humans being incarcerated in a cave. And I'm suggesting that, and I'll read you some of his quotes in a minute, that he's saying, I'm watching the whole world and I want to tell you the essential thing that's happening. Everyone's living deep underground in the cave of denial, unable to face the glaring truth of the sun outside the cave. So he's saying denial of, and the sun is the truth of our human condition, is the great issue. So he, like me, is saying the biggest issue, if you want to understand human behaviour, is that we're living deep underground in denial. That's the most profound insight about us. Then he went on immediately to speak about the problem of the death effect, in effect. He said, Plato described what happens when someone escapes from the cave into the light of day and sees for the first time the real world and returns to the cave and helps the cave prisoners escape into the sun-filled setting outside the cave, which symbolised the transition to the real world, which he said is the proper object of knowledge, which it is, to find understanding of why we're living in the cave, of our fear of the human condition. Okay? So someone gets outside the cave and can talk and write a book about what's happening inside the cave. It goes in and says, this is the explanation that'll liberate you from the cave, which is exactly what this book does. And what happens, Plato wrote, that it would hurt the cave prisoner's eyes and he would turn back and take refuge in the things which he could see, which he would think really far clearer than the things now being shown him. And if he were forcibly dragged out of the cave of the denial and not let go till he had been dragged out into the sunlight, in other words, shown the truthful description of the human condition, the process would be a painful one to which he would much object. And when he emerged into the light, his eyes would be so overwhelmed by the brightness of it that he wouldn't be able to see a single one of the things he was now told were real. Certainly not at first, because he would need to grow accustomed to the light before he could see things in the world outside the cave. So we've got this poor, dishonest, denial-based, living in hiding in a cave version of the world, not the real, not the greater one that's outside. It's totally sort of different and more profound. And so Brian Carlton was saying, I read Jeremy's books and just changed everything, and I had this, and suddenly I could see into the world, because it starts to become transparent when someone gives you the keys to unlock your brain, to make sense of human behaviour. But so this book's got a very exciting benefit to the human race, but how do you access it? So the key to try to access it is to try to talk about it and run you around this forbidden room until you get used to it a bit, And after a little while, you can start to acclimatise and get accustomed, as Plato said, to this forbidden realm. So that's the purpose of this talk, and to try to talk about this forbidden subject. And relieve us of our deeper inability to access this subject. So I've got to sort of overcome that denial, start to erode it, so you can start to get a feel for and get familiar with this forbidden realm, and then you can start reading the stuff, and hopefully it'll just be very exciting. Like one of the members in the last meeting, 11 o'clock this morning, as I said, he said, I gave it to my dad, his lawyer, and he just read one page and said, I'm not going to read that, and gave it to my wife, and she said, I'm not reading that. And that one of them didn't even turn up and said the book was terrible and poorly constructed, and thought, they always blame, if you don't know why you can't access it, you can't help but blame the presentation. So it's too complex, too dense, too long, too poorly written. I mean, people actually send me emails and say, can you send me, in real anger, can you send me an executive summary so I can understand what the hell you're trying to say here? They just can't get it at all. I mean, people are going to come to any subject with a preconceived, with their own philosophy. You don't walk around the world legalist. You try to make sense of the best you can, right? And so there's that problem as well, You've got to reconcile it with your existing explanations and understandings. And then there's a lot of adjustment, a hell of a lot, right? But the deepest and hardest adjustment, which we don't even aware of, is this, equivalent of a snake phobia, or as Plato said, this living in this cave of denial where we can't face this truth. So I want to talk about truth. I'm not talking about, how to play soccer or something. I'm talking about this darkest of all subjects, ourselves, the deeper corner of ourselves. And that's really spooky. When it starts to go down in there, as you'll see in a minute, that's pretty hard. And that's where this goes. It goes right through. Joseph Conrad's, The Heart of Darkness, written about the Congo River, there's Kutz, and this goes up, and it's in Apocalypse Now, that Marlon Brando's up there. It's gone crazy, way up the Congo River, and this Heart of Darkness, which is a metaphor for this dark corner of ourselves. And he screams out the horror, the horror, the horror. I mean, that is a metaphorical story about the journey into this dark corner of ourselves, where it leads to almost madness. And the horror, the horror, the horror. And so we all prefer to stay down at the front of the Congo River, bouncing around on the beaches with our sun umbrellas and not go near the damn thing. No one wants to venture up the river into the heart of darkness. So there's lots of metaphors, all writing, if you bored out into it, my book does it all through. It goes into this. One of the people here in the previous meeting said, I love the cartoon from Lunig where, you're going into the city and you're belly along this highway into this metropolis of madness, and then there's this, off to the left is truth and beauty, this little lone individual on his bike pedalling off into, yes, this is a huge metropolis, like out that window there, and it's all this state of madness and chaos and vindictiveness and nastiness and no one's trying to penetrate that and get behind it, and yet this one lone individual pedaling off left-hand lane, going into a whole different realm to try to penetrate this heart of darkness, this terrifying issue of us, and come back with some real answers. And that's what this book has done. Resignation is the most powerful way I know to reconnect you to the extreme horror of the fear of the human condition, right? Because what happens to children, see, we don't come in living in Plato's cave. We're actually born outside it, innocent and free, and then this world isn't ideal, is it? We instinctively, we imagine it should be, and so there's something massively wrong about it. So gradually, when children about in their late, the naughty nines and stuff, they're in a sort of flailing out at the imperfections of life and the world, but around 12, something very significant happens. They sober up and realise, look, flailing out at the frustration, being frustrated is not going to get me anywhere. I've just got to sit down and try and figure this out. I've got to try to understand why the world isn't perfect. Because if I can't understand it, I'm just going to get more and more distressed, clearly. So there's a huge change psychologically between childhood and adolescence. We actually changed the name. We call them childhood and then we call it adolescence. You ever wonder why that demarcation occurs? because you change. A child you change from being a protesting, demonstrative, naughty, extrovert child to becoming a sobered, deeply introspective adolescent. There's a big change, and even our schooling system recognises it. And you go from junior school to high school or senior school. That's in recognition that there's huge change. Now, what happens? So, at about 12, the child's brain starts to think more and more, tries to understand the imperfection of the world, right? And they keep thinking about it. And this thinking goes deeper and deeper. And they quickly learn that adults, for some reason, don't want to even talk about it. And they're all bouncing around and, laughing and putting on this brave face and smiling and buying some new blue shoes and carrying on, right? So they quickly learn that the adult world's all fake and phony and, they don't want to know about it. So they're on their own thinking about this horror. And they're still thinking about it and they go deeper and deeper. And then when you get to around 14, the question starts to really deepen and get really serious, because you start to confront not just the human condition without, but the human condition within. You start trying to make sense of the dark side of yourself, the angers and egocentricities and indifferences to others and frustrations and so on. And then when you try to face that, whether you are a worthwhile and meaningful person or not, because if you're really honest and you are all these things, full of all these angers and egocentricities and indifferences and angers and so on, then by inference, you mustn't be a worthwhile person. And that's a terrifying conclusion to reach. And so at a certain point in this journey of trying to face down the issue of the human condition, it becomes unbearable. And that's this moment of resignation when they actually decide never to visit that corner again, because it's just too, and that's the Beatles song, Let It Be. Mother Mary, come to me. When you're overwhelmed, in that dark corner, let it be. There will be an answer in the future, but not now. It's incredibly honest bit of writing. I think George Harrison might have written it. Normally it's John Lennon writes all the really profound stuff.
It was George, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let it be. Don't go there. Give up. Don't try to face that down. One day there will be an answer. And if you unpack that and board out into that, he's saying that one day there will be an understanding of the human condition, and then you won't have to resign.
So is resignation like acceptance?
It's acceptance of the world the way it is, and that you're never going to make sense of it, and if you try to, you'll just give yourself a mighty headache. As that girl said, I'm not going to go to that corner again.
Well, that's an extreme, reaction.
Yeah. But that's why I gave those descriptions. One of you mentioned that resignation was getting a bit long-winded, going on too many examples, but it's so important because it really, if you allow yourself to immerse yourself in it, because everyone does, or nearly everyone, remember being there. I mean, we've got all these dishonest excuses for it. I mean, we all know that children parents can't deal with them anymore through those years. 13, 14, 15, because they're just unreachable. In their room listening to loud music, they're just headbanging there. And if you try to talk to them, they just bite your head off, and the parents just learn to give up.
The hormones don't help with having the feelings.
Well, wait a second. Yeah, that's
what to do with the feelings.
That's what we've traditionally done. It's blamed it on hormonal change that comes with puberty, right? We call it the puberty blues, but it's self-revealing. It says blues, that's depression. And we call it, like everyone, a lot of people get glandular fever, and they blame that on hormonal. They say it's the kissing disease. It's to do with puberty. Now, if you just think about that, this is sort of cave excuse. Remember I said in the cave and the snake analogy, oh look, people stood upright because they have to go through doorways. They've got all these bullshit explanations based on living in the cave of denial, and that's why humans became bipedal and upright. I mean, it's just rubbish. The real problem, they're not even going outside and trying to think truthfully about the world they live in. They're terrified of snakes, but they don't even know. They're not denying they're even scared of snakes. So they've got all this bullshit. So living in the cave, there's all these different theories, right? So cave dwellers have got the art of bullshit, of denial, down pat. So they've got an excuse for everything. And they quickly blame it on it, and then just as your brain went to it, there's this hormonal upheaval.
I'm not sort of thinking it as like an excuse, I'm just thinking as an added obstacle.
Yeah, okay.
And obviously that, like your book, you're saying that at that age you do start I guess even I know that was when I started to think about myself, my place in the world.
Yes.
It's not just the world revolves around me.
Yes.
And how am I going to affect the world? And so, but hormones do exist and puberty does exist.
Yes.
So having those already deeper thoughts
Yes,
because of your age.
if you think about it, really, if you think about it, humans, we've been going through puberty ever since we were animals.
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
Just wait a sec. We've been going through puberty. It's one of the most ancient, becoming sexually mature that's ever happened. So we've had millions and millions of years to adjust to puberty. Eons, billions of years since we were bloody microbes. So the adjustments that are occurring. So we're well adjusted to puberty. If you get glandular fever, that means your whole immune system's got so run down it can't fight anymore, right? To get glandular fever. So that's something you've got to be under far more stress than what puberty can, which is, after all, as I said, something that's been going on in life, since we were microbes. And it's also the healthiest time of our life, when you're most vital and you're in the maximum growing period. And clearly, this puberty blues, this depression, is not because to do with puberty, hormonal upheaval, as you mentioned, Tabitha, but something far more serious, a psychological problem. And it's to do with resignation, which is a horrendous corner to go through. And some of those chapters, Robert Cole's got the Pulitzer Prize for and he's a child psychologist who wrote that agonising little paragraph about a kid going through. And he probably won the Pulitzer Prize, I think, because of that one paragraph. It was just so incredibly honest and must have saved a lot of kids' lives. And that book, Catcher in the Rye, were any of you mentioned Catcher in the Rye, or that was the previous meeting?
I said that I wanted to.
That's right, you said. Yeah.
And I was embarrassed I hadn't.
Yeah, no, it is an absolute classic.
But I didn't get it when I read it.
Yeah.
I was actually annoyed at why he was such a whinger.
Yes.
But reading what you sort of written about it, I kind of want to go back. Obviously there was a fog, there was I came in one mind, and that stayed with me the whole way through. I did.
Yeah, well, it's cleverly
It's a
written.
metaphor.
You've got to understand, we can't admit we're in denial and still maintain our denial. So how are you going to write about resignation? See, this book gets away with digging up all this truth because in chapter 2 it defends humans. It explains why we're actually the heroes of the story of life on Earth. We're not villains, worthless beings. So, Brian Carlton said, you've got to give this book to adolescents before they resign, Jeremy. That's your natural audience, because they're begging for these answers.
It's almost too late to read this now.
That's right, it's very hard. But the world is owned by adults, so I've got to start with adults as well.
But it goes back to my previous question. How do you... it's interesting to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah. We are already in this, in this madness, so to speak. Yeah. And I understand your issue. Yeah. How do you get people out of that to recognise it and become comfortable with it and absorb what's in the text? Yeah. It seems simple to go to adolescence, but of course no adolescent would read, I think part of the reason why I connected with it at times was because of some of those references which I'd come across in later life, which there's no way that I would have come across in adolescence. Yeah. Yeah. But it is quite a conundrum. Yeah. It's...
Well, now you've immersed yourself in this while we're having this meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, Catcher in the Rye is he's written about resignation without really saying what's going on, because you can't admit that it's happening without, because if you admit that resignation happened, then you're admitting to being a liar, because once you're blocking out that issue, that's the great elephant in existence, this in our lives, this issue of the human condition, which we decide never to look at again, this fearful issue of why we aren't ideally behaved and so on. The imperfection, are we worthless or not? We live in denial. And if you block that issue out, that is the great issue. So you're living in a very superficial state from there on. You're living a fraudulent, artificial, superficial, immensely fraudulent. You've denied the whole, and all your thinking is fraudulent from there on. I mean, the example I use in the book is like you say, oh, look, there's lovely autumn trees with leaves and stuff, isn't it beautiful? And then your brain thinks, you know, isn't it amazing how beautiful nature can be? And then your brain thinks, I wonder why I'm not beautiful inside, you know, I'm full of all this angst and, you know, indifference and then you go, oh, no, I'm not going to go there. So any thinking will quickly take you into this issue of the human condition. So better off not think. So there's lots of quotes in there from, they're all Nobel laureates. They all say, we don't want to think. Humans don't want to think. The Australian Rod Quantek said, thinking can get you into terrible downward spirals of doubt. So we don't want to think, we just want to stay on the surface, because we know that if we start thinking, we'll start to encounter this problem, the human condition, and we don't want to go there. We've been there once and we got absolutely cooked, and we're not going to go there again. So we're just on an absolute bender of escapism, and we're just going to live on the meniscus of it. If a bucket's there and there's a meniscus on the top, that's about where we live, because all of this is too confronting. That's why Plato, the greatest philosopher of all time, focused on this huge bit we're not looking at, underneath the meniscus, the bucket full of water, because that's what we do. We're living deep underground in this cave of denial. That's how dishonest we are and artificial and superficial we are. Now, so adults don't want to go around who are resigned and say, look, yeah, this is what resignation is. You give up on trying to think truthfully and I'm a total fraud now and all my thinking's dishonest and don't trust me at all. I mean, it just totally undermine your life. So again, that's a truth we couldn't admit until we could defend the human condition. First explain the human condition, and then and only then does it become safe to unlock and admit all these these previously off-limits subjects of resignation.
I think that's the problem, though. People feel comfortable in staying ignorant and being arrogant.
Yeah, but if you unpack that, if you bore down into what you just said, they feel comfortable in staying ignorant. Now, wait a sec, but just analyse that. They're comfortable, because they're uncomfortable if they don't stay ignorant. If they go down into that deeper, dark
learn
truth.
Something. Open themselves
it's terrifying.
up. Yeah.
There's a terror under there, okay?
But is it...
So you're getting pretty awkward about this?
No, I'm just listening. I mean,
okay.
You say you're in a catch-22 though, right? You place everyone else in the same catch-22. If they deny what you say,
they're in denial.
then you can easily, you just put them in a class of denial.
Yeah.
You can't deny what I say, because if you do, you're a part of the human condition, you know. I reject your opinion because you're obviously not a thinker.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the position you've put us in. We can't disagree with you, because if we do, you're in that group of people who can't think, so.
Yeah. What's it called? The circular argument, yeah, but there's another name for it actually. But anyway, that's true. There's a problem about if you say that everyone's in denial and then they complain and take issue with something you've said, you say, well, that's just classic denial. So they're in a situation that they can't get out of that. But let me explain that there are situations that have that characteristic about it, that you can't help it if it has that characteristic. I mean, if you're going to admit to something and talk about something that people aren't looking at or something, and then they're caught in this bind where if they complain or take issue, then they're accused of being part of it. I mean, that has those characteristics, right? I didn't create the issue of the human condition. I'm suggesting you can go and verify it. The way to see if what I'm saying is true or not, being very aware, as everyone should be, of what you're pointing out, that, you know, is why I accompany every step along the way with great quotes from great literature or whatever, so that you've got this is just not me saying this is some evidence for this. Because you should be totally sceptical. If someone says this is the book that saves the world, you almost should chuck it over your shoulder. This has got to be crap, you know. I mean, that's just outrageous hubris if ever I read it, you know. But then again, this guy seems to be a very impressive philosopher, psychiatrist, so maybe, in a way. So the thing is then is to go into, to read it, and this is rational. There's no mysticism or abstract concepts. It's all rational, first principle biology. So you can go in there and test it and question it, and you should at every step, and take issue all along the way. That's the whole. We are conscious thinking, self-adjusting beings. We're in charge of ourselves. So we don't want anybody else. This is the end of faith and belief and the beginning of knowing. We don't want brain anesthetic, we want brain food, we want answers. So if someone brings some answers, we're rational, we can go and look at them. So you're on safe ground, you can throw it over your shoulder, you should rigorously check every idea along the way, and you should take ideas on notice, say, well, okay, that might have some possibility, but I'll keep thinking about it and see if it doesn't. See, you made some pretty good points about that consciousness necessarily means we're all evil. People as a collective are evil, and that's a very rigorous and responsible position to take, to question that, right? So I'm totally with you in your scepticisms and needing to be sceptical, right? That's fine. The question is, all I'm asking you is to take the stuff on notice and read it through and see if it doesn't make sense. So what I'm talking about is, in terms of what you've said, people are fundamentally evil, right? Just to look at that. I'm saying that, and I'm using Plato as an example, so I'm not saying this. He's regarded as the greatest philosopher, and he said we're all living in denial, right? So you can take that on or reject it, but he is regarded as the greatest thing, and that is the central concept in all his thinking. And so he's saying we are living in denial of this fearful issue of the human condition. He used the word human condition, the first person who ever used it, as far as I can ever found. And the human condition is the state of being living in this compromised condition, this dilemma of good and evil. Why are humans, as I said, capable of saving a kitten up a tree and then molesting children? Or why are we capable of saving people on one hand? We have this capacity for enormous sensitivity and love, but on the other hand, there's these darker volcanic forces within in the human species. And so unable to make sense of that, therefore we live in denial. I mean, we don't live in this cave for nothing. He said we're living in this cave because we are in fear of the imperfections of human behaviour. We're living in denial of the human condition. So he's saying, okay, I agree about not calling it evil. Every time I see evil, even good, I put in inverted commas, because that's old world criticising, condemning. Because chapter 2 is all about getting rid of that word forever. I use the word upset, that we became psychologically upset as a result of a battle that emerged when we became fully conscious humans. So that this is a dignifying, redeeming, ameliorating, loving, compassionate understanding of the dark side of ourselves. So as the Rolling Stones song said, we needed sympathy for the devil, or William Blake's, marriage of heaven and hell. That's been the objective, to reconcile the two factions that exist in human life, of the dark side and light side, of the young and old, men and women, innocence and upset, country, city, mechanism and holism, science and religion. They're all manifestations of these two poles of the human situation. And one day we had to find the reconciling, loving kind. We had to. This is Lawrence Vanderpost, is a great, most quoted author in my book, my favourite writer. He said, true love is love of the difficult and unlovable. That's what that child that's resigning is wanting. When you listen to Brian Carlton's interview with me, which we only did a week or two ago, it's on this website. He found it so relieving. He just transformed him. He said, when you get it, you finally get it, this explanation really does explain the human condition, because you can experience, and that's what Einstein said, truth is what stands the test of experience, which is a scientific method. It has to be subjected to proven and survive. So, and since this experiment is about us, human behaviour, So we're the rat in the cage. We're actually the experiment. So if someone gives us explanation of us, we're in a good position to see if it's true or not, because it should start to make the world transparent. It should help us make sense of ourselves and everything around us. And Brian Carlton says, ever since I've read and got to understand it, I could talk on radio and people ring up and suddenly I can see I can see him behind them because of these insights. So, yeah, I agree we shouldn't use the term evil, and I'm not saying I'm getting rid of evil forever. The idea that humans are fundamentally bad or worthless. As I said, the end result of chapter 2 is that humans are the hero of the story of life on Earth. It's the most wonderful conclusion you could ever imagine. That humans have lived with the burden of the guilt, or whatever you like to call it, feeling unworthy, feeling sufferers of this angers and frustrations and imperfections, and never able to understand why. Yeah, Brian Carlton said, it's a really revealing interview. He said, it's so revealing, I'm just sitting there and staggered. It's just amazing what he says. You can listen to it. The first 20 minutes of it, because we're supposed to be talking about, I'm going to explain the Hebrew, but then, he started yabbering about his resignation he went through. It was so amazing. It was so incredibly revealing. I was just stunned. But anyway, one of the things was he says, so I'm a 12-year-old growing up through to 15, and I'm searching for answers, like he said. And I realise that for some reason the adults don't want to talk about it because they're all resigned. They're post-resignation. So they learn, I'm not going near that dark corner. And 2 days after people resign, honestly, you can hardly get them to remember it. It's such a terrifying depression. They never want to revisit that corner again. This is the black box inside of humans we're talking about here. The personal unspeakable, the forbidden part of ourselves. So children are on their own, wrestling with this. And I think one of you said, maybe you can't give it to adolescents or something, because the problem is adolescents are now so instinctively suspicious of adults that anyone ever going to talk to them. I've talked to adolescents and tried to help them. But you can tell in their expression, they're not even trusting any adults that'll ever talk any truth at all. So they're not really believing that you're going to talk truth. So you have to talk a long time before it starts to dawn on them that you are dealing with this, what they're actually wrestling with. And gradually you see their eyes open, and gradually you see them start to instead of this, that's what Robert Cole said when he was talking to this kid. The kid wouldn't even look at him. And then he said, what are you wrestling with? Not yourself. And that's when the kid stopped and looked at him straight in the eyes. And he said, the kid said, why do you ask that? And he said, Robert Cole said, and he said in an act of honesty, because it was outside what I've been trained to do, which is basically deny the human. Because I remember being there, and the kid started crying. Why? Because Coles had reached him with some honesty about the utter hypocrisy of human life that the kid could see and no one was admitting. And that changed. The same thing when you read Catcher in the Rye. Holden Caulfield is this 16-year-old that's still unresigned and can see that the world is, he calls them all phonies and fakes and artificial, and couldn't study, thrown out of school after school. I just want to escape to a little hut by the stream and chop wood. I don't want to have anything to do with this madness. The world's crazy, no one's admitting it. And then he, like Robert, met this guy like Robert Coles, and this adult who actually ratted on the adult world and admitted that, he said, there's a lot of humans that and it saved the character in Catcher in the Rye's life. He said, and what the adult said, this fall, depression, that you're riding for, it's a special kind of fall, a horrible kind, where you just keep falling and falling, utter depression. The adult then spoke of men who at some time or other in their lives were looking for something their own environment couldn't supply them with, so they gave up looking, they resigned. Adding, you'll find that you're not the first person who was ever confused and frightened and even sickened by human behaviour. That's the key line in the whole of that book. Because yes, to be confused and frightened to the point of being sickened by human behaviour, indeed suicidally depressed by it, including your own behaviour, is the effect the human condition has if you haven't resigned yourself to living in relieving but utterly dishonest superficial life of denial of it. So you see, just as Robert Coles just spoke a little bit of truth, he said, it's out of school because I'm not supposed to do this, but he just said, I actually remember being there, going through that tight corner, and the kids started crying. And so Holden Caulfield's bouncing around, unable to cope with the world gone crazy, and no one's admitting it, and they're all pretending it's not, everything's fine, and it's not. And suddenly this adult, in an absolute moment of desperation, he talks to this adult, and this adult rats on what they're doing. He says, you're not the first to confused and frightened, even sickened by human behaviour. And at that point, finally, the kid had got some honesty. Now, when you listen to Brian Carlton's interview, he says, so when he's 12 and he's progressing through to 15, he's going through these early stages of it. He learns that adults can't help, they're not interested. And so then he starts reading everything he can get his hand on, he said. All the philosophical books, everything he can get his hand on. He's trying to make sense of human life. And so he's reading everything. And everything's written from inside the cave. So it's artificial and superficial, it's living on the meniscus, it's not down inside, it's just dishonest. And because he's unresigned, he can see through that dishonesty. And he can very quickly suss it out. Who's fake and what isn't. You've got this amazing shit detector if you haven't resigned. That's how I found all these answers in this book, by just thinking truthfully rather than... Anyway, so I'm not clever, I'm just not... Anyway, not in denial of all these truths, and suddenly I could think about things that for some reason I didn't know at the time, why no one else wanted to think about. But anyway, so Brian Carlton... So he's searching for the truth, and he's reading everything he gets his hand on. Kids do that, going through resignation. They search for it, but they've got this immaculate shit detector, and they can tell if it's crap, if it's bullshit, if it's not honest, if it's cave talk, cave speak. And everything is. Libraries and huge libraries full of it. All talking about the human condition. I mean, great literature or something occasionally might allude to some truth. And that's why it's great, because it's got a little bit of truth, but not too much. You can take people near to the fire, but not right into the fire. So Robert Cole's got the Pulitzer Prize, I'm suggesting, because of that one paragraph. That little bit of truth he let through was so special, so extraordinary. And so, you know, that's been the name of the game. But there's some little bits of truth, but not huge amount of it, kind of thing. And so he's searching and searching, and he says, you'll hear him say it, he says, I got so desperate to find some truth that I started reading the encyclopedia. And he stops me and says, I actually did that. And I was that desperate. Because I'm trying to think, there must be somewhere in this whole damn collection of some truth. I mean, that's how desperate he was to try to find some honesty in this world gone crazy and living in dishonesty, right?
Can you give us an example of a specific untruth?
Well, the book's full of them, right? So the untruth is that just to start to walk through the book with the untruths, would be that the stress that children are going through adolescence is due to hormonal upheavals, right? I'm saying that that's a totally dishonest, cave-dwelling truth, right? And so what I'm going to do with this book is go through and explain all the great mysteries in science. First of all, chapter 1, I've got to connect you with the human condition, this theory that we are all living in denial, right? And I agree, you should take that on board with a pinch of salt and say, okay, I get what your argument is, let's see if it works, right? Let's put it to the test. And the ultimate test being if it starts to make our own life transparent, because that would be, you know, as Einstein said, truth what stands the test of experience. So if our own experience of this being about us is that it starts to make everything around us clear, as Brian Carlton says, you start seeing through everything, then that's how powerfully honest it is. But anyway, chapter 1 starts to go through and it says, so the premise of the book is, I'm going to explain human behaviour from a profound, honest base. To do that, I need to make us aware of the human condition. So I made you aware by presenting all this stuff. So now let's go and look at biology. So then I begin, let's get serious. So now you understand, or supposedly you've got an appreciation that we may be living in denial of the human condition. Now, let's take that as an assumption, and then let's look at all the biological arguments that we've been living with, that biology has been giving us. So I begin by saying, well, what is science? So I explain that science is mechanistic and reductionist. It's living in denial of this subject matter. It's not looking at the overview. It's reducing its focus to looking down on the details and mechanisms, and avoiding this overarching bigger issue of the human condition because it can't confront it. They're all run, scientists are humans living in denial, supposedly, resigned adults living in denial of the human condition. So they're mechanistic and reductionist. They're looking down at the details, not at the overview, which is unbearable until we find the explanation of it. So, as Let It Be says, until there will be some answers one day, but until then, let it be. Don't go there because you give yourself a hiding. And so the book then goes through all the biological ideas, and it starts off with social Darwinism. Because Darwin originally said, when his idea of natural selection, that in his first 2 editions, or 3 editions I think, he didn't use the word survival of the fittest. He said there's some survive and some don't. As to whether those that survive are better, could be considered better or superior, he said, I'm not going to make it that judgment. In fact, you'll see in chapter 3 that's explained that to be altruistic and give your life for the greater whole, to maintain the greater whole, can actually be meaningful, more meaningful than being selfish. But that's when you get to chapter 3. So Darwin was actually right not to sort of to say that you were better if you survived. But his mates, Spencer and Wallace, they persuaded him to use the word survival of the fittest. So he said, okay. And that was a coup for the cave dwellers, because suddenly you could use Darwin's idea of natural selection to say those that survive are the winners. Survival of the fittest. They're fitter than everybody else. That's why they should survive. So now businessmen say, well, we're the best, shoemakers in the industry because we're the best, survival of the fittest, Darwin said it, We're the best competitors. But you see, so that's a lie, because Darwin was actually honest. They turn it, so I'm saying it's called social Darwinism because it's used throughout industry and everywhere to justify selfishness. But in fact, Darwin wasn't going to go that road until his arm was twisted. So then I begin to go through all the different biological theories and dismantle them and reveal what they're really doing, because I'm saying I know what the game plan is behind all the behaviour, all their actions, all their theories. The game plan is to avoid the human condition. They're living in the cave of denial. They're not being honest. They're trying to find another way, a more clever way, to avoid the human condition. And so he goes on and talks about evolutionary psychology and all these other theories, which says, because there's some big problems with social Darwinism, because there's some, like bees and so on, and they're so unconditionally selfless. They give their life for the queen, and they're unconditionally selfless. So survival of the fittest, trying to be the winner, is not a universal phenomenon in nature, because bees are selfless. And we've got our own moral instincts to explain, our conscience, which wants us to behave in a cooperative, loving way. So there's some big holes in social Darwinism. So then, to counter that idea, they came up with another theory and said that they're just indirectly reproducing their genes by the queens. The ants who are selfless and bees that give their life, when a bee stings you, it dies on behalf of the colony. So it's altruistic, but it's actually not altruistic, because in sacrificing its life, it's maintaining the queen, the colony, and the queen reproduces its genes. So it's indirectly fostering its own genes. So it's actually ultimately still selfish. But the trick they did with evolutionary psychology is then they took the next step and applied that to our human moral instincts and said that they're also driven by us trying reciprocity, us trying to reproduce our genes by fostering others who are related to us. And when they took that step, that was a fraud. That was a human condition avoiding dishonest use of the truth that bees and ants do foster their own reproduction indirectly by fostering the queen. We're not doing that. As you'll see, some biologists said, that's ridiculous. I don't help people across the road because I'm not even related to them, I'm not trying to reproduce my own genes. So there's a flaw in that theory. So then they came up with another theory, and he goes on, and the book traces all these things. But because I've got in place this idea that we're living in denial, that's underlying all our behaviour, this is cave-dwelling behaviour that's going to go on here. You start looking at all these biological theories, you can dismantle them and see that they are, in fact, lying through their teeth. They're finding a way to avoid the human condition. They keep faking it, because if you're living in the cave, you can't walk around and say, look, I'm faced the human condition. When you resign, you decide to lie, to not face that truth again. So you've got to come up with some excuse. You've got to say, we're competitive and selfish because of our animal heritage, that we want to reproduce our genes, which is rubbish. We suffer from a psychological condition, not an animal, reproduce your genes condition. So we have all these lies. So the first chapter is really, really powerful, and it's only because it can dismantle all of current biological thinking. And it can only do that because I've first got in place this explanation made you aware that we're living in denial of the human condition. So I argue, we're looking in denial of the human condition. These are Plato and all these guys said so. This is resignation, so this is what's happening. Okay, let's take this theory and see if it applies. Let's look at all the biology that's supposedly explaining us. And yeah, when you take that with you and you start looking at it, all dismantles instantly. And people comment, biologists comment about just how extraordinary, accountable, how quick I'm able to dismantle all those theories, which there's books and books written about them. But because I'm using this insight, that what their game plan really is, I can suddenly make it transparent what's going on. So the end of chapter 1 is a dismantling of biology, all the theories, based on that they're pretending, they're lying, they're trying to avoid the human condition, they're not trying to face it. So then I switch into different gear and go to chapter 2 and say, now let's try a different tack. Let's actually try to confront the human condition and see if we can make sense of human behaviour. Instead of what they're doing is trying to avoid it and not getting anywhere. You can't find the truth from lies. You can't find the truth from in the cave. As Plato said, you've got to be outside the cave. So then I said, in chapter 2, I said, let's take another fresh look at this. If we look at the human condition, our behaviour, very simply and straightforwardly, free of denial, just as honest as day is long, the explanation of the human condition is right there in front of you. If we look at the human condition, our behaviour, very simply and straightforwardly, free of denial, just as honest as day is long, the explanation of the human condition is right there in front of you. Because we're obviously conscious thinking animals, but we must have been instinctively controlled like other animals to begin with. Then we acquired a conscious mind, probably some 2 million years ago. So we start thinking for ourselves because we're self-adjusting systems now. But we've got instincts that have got their own orientations. So the conscious mind is inevitably going to get into conflict with the instincts. So I use this analogy of a stork flying up the coast of Africa, which is perfectly instinctively orientated. Through natural selection, it's acquired that, where to fly, where not to fly. Don't go across the Sahara, you get frizzled. Because only storks that had the genetic makeup to fly there got frizzled. So now all storks genetically know where to fly. But that's not an understanding of where they should fly. That's an orientation acquired through natural selection. Natural selection can give species orientation, but not understanding. So what would happen if we grab one of these bloody storks and we whack a fully conscious brain on his head and we jump in a light, ultralight, and we fly along behind him to see what happens? We'll see the human condition emerge in the first day. Because what's that stork going to do? He's flapping along with all the other storks. They haven't got a big conscious brain yet, but he has. He starts thinking for himself. There's an island, I think I'll go down and have a feed of those apples or have a rest. He heads off down toward the island, carries out his own experiment in self-adjustment because he's conscious. And he's only going to find out what are the right understandings by experimenting. So he has to be brave enough to experiment. But immediately, so we've seen him fly off course down to the island because the flight path doesn't go off course, it goes across the island. And then we see him hesitate. We're in the ultralight watching him. So the whole human thing is going to happen right before our eyes. So he hesitates. Oh, he thinks, because you can imagine what's happening. He thinks, well, if I fly back on course, my instincts are going to be really happy with me. And all the other storks are obeying their instincts. They're going to be happy. Everyone's going to be happy because... but my conscious mind's not happy. It's not finding knowledge. I've got to persevere with his search for understanding. So he hesitates, thinks about flying back on course, knows that'll make him feel good, but he's not going to find knowledge. And he says, no, I've got to persevere with his search for knowledge. So he heads off towards the island, right? And now his instincts are going to get really loud and criticise him. We've got instincts to make us want to drink water or, eat food or something. We can defy them. We've got a conscience that wants us to do it. We can defy that. We can override it and say, no, I don't want to drink water or I don't want to obey my conscience. So we do have instincts and we can defy them. So old Adam Stork, we call him Adam Stork because it's like the story of the Garden of Eden with a different ending. So old Adam Stork flies off towards the island, perseveres with his heroic search for knowledge, but he's got to live with this criticism. So how is he going to cope with that criticism? He's only got 3 choices. He can block it out, he can get angry with it, Or he can try to prove it's not deserved that he's bad for flying off course. He's going to become insecure, needing to validate himself all the time. So he needs a win, some reinforcements. He's going to become angry, egocentric and alienated. Ego means conscious thinking self. His ego is going to become centred or focused on trying to validate himself. So old Adam Stork's become angry, egocentric and alienated. But if we stand back from that, who's the hero of that story? Old Adam Stork, because he had to have the courage to defy his instincts and fly off course and search for knowledge. And ultimately to find the ultimate knowledge you needed, which is the explanation of the human condition. But to find that, you had to find out about nerves and genes, how one's an insightful learning system, and one's not. One can give species orientations. One's orientating. We had orientating instincts. When the insightful learning system emerged, it had to challenge the instincts for the control of our life. And when that happened, there was this war. And if you want to work out how we solve that war, well, just look at Adam Stork. If he could have sat down a limb right there before day one, before the shit hit the fan, if you like, and had a talk with his instincts and said, now listen, just hold it, you guys. You instinctively know where we should and shouldn't fly, but you don't understand a damn thing. I need to understand the world. I'm using this conscious mind. So by all means, tell me when I fly off course, but don't criticise me in effect, you know. I'm a conscious mind that needs to understand cause and effect. You're a you're a gene-based learning system that can give species orientations, but you can't understand the world. So I need to search for understanding, right? And supposedly then the two parts of himself would have understood each other and you would have reconciled the two factions. But he's in a catch-22. He's got no knowledge. This is day one of starting to think. He's got no ability to explain anything, let alone the human condition. It's going to take humans, in fact, 2 million years to find that knowledge. You have to learn about genes and nerves and how the different information systems work before he can reconcile himself. So he's got 2 million years of having to live without any defence for himself. So at all that time, all we had, sure we tried to civilise it and restrain it, all we had was anger, egocentricity and alienation as our defence. We had to live alienated, hiding in the cave, because we couldn't face the truth, we couldn't defend ourselves. But now that we can, because that story, the Garden of Eden story in Genesis is the same story but a different ending. In the Genesis it says, we once lived in the Garden of Eden, obviously in a pre-human condition, innocent state. Then we took the fruit from the tree of knowledge because it was desirable for gaining wisdom, meaning obviously we became conscious. And then we became evil monsters and were chucked out of the Garden of Eden. But this story says, no. Adam and Eve, when they became conscious, took the tree of knowledge, were the heroes. They had to suffer becoming. We had to march into hell, like the song The Man of La Mancha said. We had to march into hell for a heavenly cause. That's the paradox of the human condition. We had to suffer becoming upset in order to find these understandings that would liberate us from upset. We had to lose ourselves to find ourselves. That's the paradox of the human condition. We had to suffer, had to march into hell, fly off course, become corrupted, in order to find the knowledge that would allow us to master our brain and reconcile ourselves with our instincts and get criticism off our back and become a liberated, transformed species. So that's this journey. So that's an explanation that dignifies humans. It says we're good and not bad, right? So the first chapter, to answer your question about evil doesn't exist, that presupposes that everyone's evil. I don't like the word evil. I'm talking about that we suffer from the human condition, which is that we suffer from these angers, egocentricities and alienations, and that when we're thinking about that issue, all-important issue, from inside the cave we can't make sense of it, we just come up with a bunch of lies. But if we look about it very simply, and in a denial-free way, as we do in chapter 2, we'll find the answers right there in front of us. Because quite obviously, we became conscious, when before being conscious, we must have been controlled by instincts. And if you think about that, when we became conscious, it must have led to a battle between the two. And if you think about that a bit, that's what upset us. So we did become upset for a damn good reason. We're the bloody hero. The conscious mind is nature's greatest invention, surely. And since the conscious mind had to suffer all this unjust condemnation for some 2 million years, we must be the heroes of the story of life on earth. So suddenly, instead of being banishment-deserving evil monsters, we turn out to be the heroes of the story of life on earth. The best thing since sliced bread and beyond. This is a marvellous, but it's found by not living in the cave, trying to deny that we're in denial. once you accept the possibility that we are in denial and start thinking about things, that's all I do. I go through the book applying that idea that if you try to think about any of the great problems facing us, such as you get to chapter 3, so that's chapter 2. Chapter 1 is just a demolition of all the bullshit biology. Chapter 2 is the real biology that's found by thinking truthfully, and I'm not clever. The answers are right there in front of us. All we have to do is look. The third great truth in my book is chapter 3, and that's, well, what's the meaning of existence? And it says the meaning of existence is to develop the order of matter, that everything we look at, the tree, it is composed of parts. It's got leaves and branches, and within those branches it's got fibres, and within those fibres it's got cells, and within those cells it's got compounds, and within those compounds it's got atoms and molecules, and there's a hierarchy of parts in that system. Everything is witness to this development of order of matter, and there's a physical law that makes it happen, which is negative entropy. It's the most obvious truth on planet Earth that the meaning of existence is to develop ever larger and more stable wholes. It's what's happening all around us. Everything, the word thing, is a recognition of something, an arrangement of matter that's enduring through time. Now, there's a huge problem with that in terms of the human condition. For a larger whole to form and all the parts to cooperate and stay harmonious together, they must all act selflessly. Consider the welfare of the larger whole above their own welfare, because if they start off behaving selfishly, it'll disintegrate. So selflessness is what the glue that holds a whole together, whereas selfishness is disintegrative and divisive. So if the truth of the meaning of existence is to develop the order of matter, then selflessness is the theme, the glue that makes it all happen, which is really what we mean by the word love, unconditional selflessness. It makes wholes stay together. But if you admit that truth, you're back confronting the human condition. Well, why aren't we cooperative, selfless and loving? Why are we divisive? It condemns us. So we don't want to admit that truth. In fact, that's the most obvious truth on planet Earth, integrative meaning, and it's the most fearful truth because it's condemned us to hell. So we deny it. In fact, we're so afraid of that truth, we deified and made it God. So God is the personification of the truth of integrative meaning. And if you read quotes from Einstein and Stephen Hawking there, they recognise that. You could call the order that's apparent in the universe and on planet Earth God, because that's really the underlying thing that's going on, this development of order. So that's chapter 3, and that's a truth that I'm suggesting is also denied because of our fear of the human condition. And chapter 4 is, well, how do we acquire moral instincts? Remember I said that evolutionary psychology said, oh, we got that like ants and bees because we're trying to foster the genes in others around us, our relatives, which is rubbish. We acquired them through nurturing, but again, and you'll see the bonobos and all that talked about in chapter 4. But again, that's the truth we couldn't face while we couldn't explain the human condition, because no mother, since everyone became angry, egocentric and has been able to love her infant as much as they all were before we became angry, egocentric. So all mothers feel guilty, you know. Parents would rather admit to being an axe murderer than a bad parent, you know. So again, that was a great truth we couldn't admit until we could defend the human condition. So first explain the human, gets the guilt off our back, then we can admit all these truths. Integrative meaning, that nurturing made us human, how we acquired our moral instincts. So that's chapter 4 and 5. Chapter 6 is how we became conscious. You can read, and again, you'll see the blocks to that as our fear of the human condition. And then chapter 7 is, well, the whole history of this. Let's present the whole history of humans since we were like primates when this nurturing started to develop us into a cooperative whole, right through to the human condition emerging some 2 million years ago, and it got worse and worse and became more angry, and essentially the last 2,000 years we were in a horrendously dangerous state of terminal alienation, terminally upset, living deeper in the cave of dishonesty. And so let's describe that whole journey truthfully, now that we can, now it's safe to. So it talks about this journey, amazing journey of description of. So you can read chapter 7, you'll never have read the true story of humans. It's the greatest story ever told, and it's never been told before. So that's chapter 7. And chapter 8 is the one everyone wants to know, well, how does this help me? How does this transform my life? How does being able to understand human existence, understand the human condition, the dark side of myself, heal myself? Well, the obvious answer is, like Carl Jung was everything, wholeness for humans is the ability to own our own shadow. So if we can own our own shadow, meaning the dark side of ourselves, make sense of that, we'll become whole again. We can reconcile the two parts of ourselves. So old Adam Stalker flew off course to that island. The moment that he can finally sit down with his instinctive self and say, now, this is why I had to do it, mate. Get off my case. I'm a goodie and not a baddie after all. He no longer has to get angry or alienated or egocentric. All those things go. So this is incredibly relieving. The day that Adam Stork finds the knowledge that he's setting out to find to finally explain himself is the day that all his troubles end. And that's how it ends, how this information transforming life is what chapter 8 explains. So that's the book. And it's a journey based on explaining the human condition, right? So that's the whole story about this book. So if you go home and supposedly reread chapter 1 and then chapter 2, I think you should find it, and you can read it. It's all freely online. We're not trying to make money out of this. These answers are considered so important that they're made free to everybody around the world. So you can just get them online. And you can read it yourself, you can download it, and I've got to make a voice one where you can listen to it while you're in your car or whatever, but it's all there, and then if we reconvene day after tomorrow, and hopefully if you have a chance to have another look at chapter 1, and then we can see if this little talk didn't make it all a little bit more understandable and helped a lot, because we're hoping it will. We're going to learn from that if it does help, and if it does, then other people can get the benefit of me doing exactly this, raving on, and they can watch me talking to you, and they can, and some of your questions are very good, or they're all very good questions, you know, and hopefully we can make some sense, and we can see if it helps. So thanks a million for coming along.
Thanks.
I wanted to jump straight in, Tone, because I just absolutely love that talk. I loved your introduction, and it just covers so much, that talk, from the denial, you know, our initial skepticism, you know, both things I so relate to in my journey, and then the incredible, you know, psychological event of resignation. And sorry, I just couldn't help but jump in, because it's just so amazing to be able to understand the human condition, and Jeremy go through the actual explanation with the Adam Stork story, and that it's all solved now, and you know, we can finally and legitimately transform our lives and world. You know, we're just standing on, you know, such a solid bedrock of knowledge, and it's just so grounding to hear Jeremy, who's so secure in this realm, talk about, like, in an introductory talk like that. It just puts you in that solid ground. And you know, I love it's humanity's story, but you know, it's also a deeply personal one too. And for me, it does come down to that Adam Stork story, you know, where we had no choice but to become, you know, incredibly upset. And that's my story. And, you know, I love that quote that Jeremy, you know, uses, that, you know, we had to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And just to finally have our dark side, our realism, our upset state explained and defended is just absolutely magnificent, and it is the turning point for all of us. And never before have we seen this. I mean, there's so many movements and, you know, 1,001 books out there that talk about, you know, it can heal this and save this and, you know, save the trees. I mean, they're just all dead ends, because they're not tackling and dealing with the human condition and solving it. And only that can bring, you know, real and lasting change, as Jeremy says. And that's what Jeremy's brought to the earth. And it's just, it's absolutely magnificent. You know, like, you know, we all suffer from the human condition, that, you know, it's a personal, you know, sort of lonely kind of journey you go on, even though we're all struggling with it. And it just made me think, when we're listening to that our discussing the truth about, or hearing the truth about yourself, is also deeply personal, and it's a bit deeply personal journey. And I remembered when I was watching that, you know, Jeremy talking about, like, that, I think it was Einstein who said, you know, truth is what stands the test of experience. And that's exactly right. You know, you start off deaf and skeptical and not being able to hear anything. And then suddenly, you know, you're persevering and you keep trying to hear this, and you're listening to talks like that and reading, and everything starts to make sense. And human behavior just before you becomes absolutely transparent. And, you know, not just around you in the world, but within you too. And yeah, of course, like, that's challenging to see the human condition in yourself. I mean, like Jeremy's talked about, that key point in resignation, you know, you never want to go there again. I mean, I don't remember resignation in as such, I mean, because it was just such a horrible thing, but I know that, you know, I'm basically stalled in that state where, you know, that unresolved question of who am I? You know, I never psychologically grew up, and none of us do. And, you know, this information's taking, like Jeremy got the transcript actually of the talk, and he used, you know, that the metaphorical line of the heart of darkness. I mean, that's what this is taking you back to, that depression in myself where I tried to make sense of the world and tried to make sense of the human condition in myself. And but what you realize now is that it is safe. You know, the human condition is solved. We're in the clear. There's a whole new free world of understanding, and it's so wonderful and exciting. But yeah, I mean, I can see now that underneath all my denial is my terror of the human condition, and underneath that is this horrendous deep, shame and guilt, you know, about being so seemingly bad and destructive, when our souls tell us the complete opposite, that we should be loving. And, you know, I guess the key thing for me is that sort of heart of darkness. Like I carry this deep insecurity in myself about my fundamental worth and goodness and meaning. And, you know, to cope with that, I had no option but to block it all out and resign. But, you know, that really is, it's an extraordinary agony to live with that insecurity about my fundamental worth. And, you know, I just also think it's so amazing to think about that in myself. And, you know, that the after resignation, the moment after resignation, it's all just about coping. You know, I was desperately trying to prove my worth, and, you know, ruthlessly competitive, selfish, anything I could grab my hands on to that was just driving my behavior night and day, and just proving that I am worthy. And, you know, it really is a torture beyond measure. And it's just such a heavy burden. And, you know, I see it not only in myself, but I see it so clearly in the direct generations above me and the direct generations below me, that they're all and everywhere, you know, we're all struggling with this same predicament. You know, just generation after generation are just locked in this world with no answers. And, you know, our pain is, there's just no stop, and there's just no end to the pain. And, you know, it doesn't matter how much we meditate or, you know, we pray or anything. It's nothing is bringing an end to the suffering on this planet. And it's only getting worse. You know, it's just a complete runaway train. And so it's just absolutely like amazing that we're sitting here listening to a talk like that, this information that does provide the answers. Finally, you know, we have answers to every single question. And, you know, that Adam Stork story, I can see it in myself, and I can reconcile those two selves within me, make sense of life and why all the madness happened, and in me and in the whole world around me. And, I can know, you know, that I'm actually worthwhile, I'm good, and I'm heroic. Like that is the message here. You know, we are upset, but we are good, and the human condition solved, and it's and, you know, the pain can end. You know, it can all stop. All the madness, all the corruption and selfishness can stop. It's just all over, and it's just the most incredible thing. You know, the battle, if you like, to find understanding has been fulfilled, and, you know, the human race can finally transform and heal, and nobody will have to go through what we have been through as in these 2 million years. You know, nobody will have to resign again, and we really are free. It's just extraordinary, just thing to be involved with, that we can live for this solution and take it to the world. And I know like all this discussion just so quickly ends up with the transformation, because we've got this amazing, chance to really make a difference on this planet. The solution has arrived, and everything is over. Everything, all selfishness and corruption has been fundamentally understood, and we can explain our fundamental goodness now. I know I'm not bad. I am upset, but I'm good. And that puts me in such a powerful position, because I can actually legitimately abandon that whole selfish way of living. And for the first time ever, that is legitimate and responsible, because it's all over. We really have got we have understanding that does completely free us as a whole species from that selfish way of living, and the battle to find understanding of ourselves has been won. So the pain stops with me, and it's just I just feel so thrilled to have watched that again. For me, it's just magnificent. Anyway, so I just had to jump in.
Awesome, Suze. That's so good. Does anyone else want to say something?
I'll say something. I was just thinking, because on the point of resignation that you were making, I noted down, because at one point when Jeremy was talking, I think it was earlier on, one of the women, she said, she was referring to resignation being an extreme reaction. And I wanted to sort of use my experience going through resignation to give a bit of an example, because I remember, prior to resignation, I had already gone through the process of asking the sort of big questions to the adult world. Why are humans the way they are, and why is the world the way it is? And not getting any real or truthful answers to those questions, and also being able to sense the discomfort and the uneasiness in the room when I asked those questions. I stopped asking them, and I realized it was a no-go zone. And so at that point, I realized that I had to wrestle with these questions by myself. And so at that point, I'm becoming more and more desperate, and wondering even deeper questions by that point, like why isn't the world as loving towards me as my instincts expect? And why is the world so divisive and alienated? And even why are people my age, and myself included, becoming as alienated and as divisive as the adult world is, when we had sworn since childhood to never become that? And so I think that was the tipping point for me, once the issue of the human condition within me became the subject of focus. And because seeing this state of my own alienation and my own egocentricities, without having the defense of being able to understand the human condition, all I could do was look at myself in disgust and conclude that I'm unworthy, I'm the blight on this earth. And so that suicidal depression is what drove then the need for me to just block out any issue of the human condition, and to seek power, fame, fortune, and glory to get enough reinforcement so that I could sustain some sense of self-worth to keep at bay that insecurity. But in the process, becoming fraudulent and, perpetrator of lies and all that. But also, my last point, I wanted to clarify that when I was in school and just prior to resignation, I could almost sense, and everyone else could sense as well, that there was this underlying building up of depression within everybody my age. But nobody spoke about it, no one acknowledged it, but you could sense as if you were going through it with everybody. And there was almost this unspoken mutual understanding of the path that we were about to take. And when I reflect on that, I just think how heroic and how courageous of humans, despite the amount of pain, to be able to, persevere and be as resilient as we've been, to continue the search for knowledge, to develop any form of coping mechanism that we could, until someone like Jeremy could come out and put all the pieces together to understand the human condition. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
Yeah. Just the ability to be able to talk about, with each other. It is like you were saying, Alex, it's like, well, for my life anyway, my whole life is under the duress of the human condition. You're just living. I'm a rock. I'm an island, like Paul Simon said, or whatever. It's just you're dealing with it yourself. You can't go anywhere. You can't talk to your friends. You can't talk to your parents. It's your problem to deal with. And I just having it just out in the open, being able to understand it, being able to go over the whole thing, it enables us finally to have a connection between people. Like, we don't actually realise how cut off we are from everybody else. I mean, honestly, in the future, we just, all the inane sort of shit that we talk about day to day, now, how's the weather? What about the footy? Get a win from... That's not... We are going to 100% understand each other, know exactly how each other are feeling. We actually know deep in, we know each other now because we can understand from understanding the human condition. Everybody is walking around with this immense insecurity and, sadness, a shame within inside them. That's how they're feeling. Like, if you want to be genuine, when people ask you, how's your day going? Honestly, the answer is, I'm absolutely just about on my deathbed. I'm a absolute corpse, and I'm just doing my best to smile and say, hello, and isn't the sun glorious today? And the grass is green and the sky's blue, and my team won footy on the weekend. And that is as much as we can possibly do, because in actual fact, everybody is just living in complete terror, in a complete war with themselves. And it's actually, horror. I know from my own experience, I've been in the most unthinkable war with myself since I was 3. And it's a cross between a self-hatred and a complete and utter shame of myself. Now, if you knew me and you saw me as a little boy, you'd see a little boy running around, and I was good at sport, and I enjoyed myself, and I grew up on a farm, but underneath the whole time is this distraught, inconsolable person, this little boy inside of me. And he's still there now. And it's all because of the human condition. You come into the world, you're expecting unconditional love, you're expecting selfless, you're expecting a true and unbreakable bond with your mother particularly, and your parents. And your parents are sufferers of the human condition. And that is, it's not what we're expecting. And children, it's probably one of the most key things that you can possibly understand when you understand the human condition, is how sensitive children are, how much, how trusting they are, how loving they are, how much they know within every fibre of their cell and being that this world is all about cooperation. Like Jeremy was talking about, integrative meaning. The whole world, it is so obvious that every single thing in this world is working towards order and integration. And it is so obvious to a child that the world's not like that. And that, you know, and that's where the horror starts for children. They just don't get the love that they need. Anyway, sorry. Does someone else want to say something before I crap on to?
I love listening to you crapping on. It's great. I was just going to say that there's so much already been said, but going back to that presentation, that is just such a wonderful synopsis of everything. If you could really put it, I mean, there's so many. Like the interview is another great, summary of everything. But then to hear Jeremy go through that with a panel of people and watch the reactions and see how compassionately he delivers that information, to me it's just wonderful to watch, and really drilling down on how difficult that is to take in, I think is something too that is really good about that whole presentation. And I know that's, it starts with the difficulty and the deaf effect, and I think the fear is the thing really that is, as you were saying, like it's the horror, the heart of darkness. And but the way that it's explained in the book, and it actually compassionately takes you through that. And I think that's really important for anyone that's coming into this, is that, the book and all of the information that's there is laid out for a reason. It's compassionately done, that, there's the analogies, and the Adam Stork story in itself, to me, is just such an anchor to grab onto, because it explains it in just such a simple story, but it is so profound in what it means. When you actually identify yourself as Adam Stork, it just, everything falls into place, and you just go, whoa, that is it. That's why the world is the way it is. That's why I react the way I do. Why other people. That's to me the point of transparency, was when you can actually lay those analogies onto yourself and onto the world, and what a magnificent tool to do that. And Jeremy's done that in this presentation as well. And yeah, I could talk about it for ages, but I just love how compassionately it's done. And if anyone's working their way through the material, take it off in those bite sizes. If the book's too big, go through the interview, then go through this hour presentation, and then there's other hour presentations that are a similar structure, because it just helps you absorb it and take in and get you where the excitement is just ridiculous, because you're so relieved, because you know what's going on. The transparency is there, and it's just such a gift. Yeah, it's just such a big gift. Anyway, yeah.
I agree, Colleen, and I just love what everyone said there. It was just terrific, and you never crap on, Tone, by the way.
No.
I mean, I always just feel incredibly inadequate after I hear Jeremy talk, because, like you said, Colleen, he is just skipping around in this whole unforbidden world like it's a big, paddock of daisies. It's just hopping around free as a bird, explaining it all and how it all flows, and just all, like, he wasn't reading anything there. It was just, all through. And when someone asked a question that, like that guy asked a couple of sort of, curly questions that I probably would have struggled with for a while, and Jeremy just, plows straight into it. But and I just love what you said, Colin, about that Adam Stork story, because if you can get that in your bones, you're on safe ground. Like, that is the foundation that gives us the defense we need for the whole human condition for 2 million years and in our own life. Exactly as you said. Anyway, it's just it's so precious, that story. And again, I mean, I haven't listened. I said before, I hadn't listened to that for a while, that talk, and it's just absolute magic. And the way Jeremy was talking as well about living in Plato's cave, I agree that living in denial, and explaining what the deaf effect and having to become accustomed to the light is just such a key point, because we are so necessarily living in denial because of the human condition. And so it's really, really important that and it's not a race. It's not there's no sort of a program of time that this takes to sink in, or the depth to which it sinks in, or whatever. It's just about becoming accustomed to the light. And and the answer to that is, if you stand on that sort of that foundation of truth, that Adam Stork story, sort of foundation of truth, then the answer to that, breaking that denial, is to talk about it, is to just sort of interact and keep it up, like keep this truth up. And that's what we can do. Like everyone who's listening to this and is here on the screen, and somewhere along the line, this information's resonated with them. And it initially, it just hits you at this level. It's so overwhelming. You could see it in some of those people's faces in that talk. They're just at the beginning, they're just like eyes are goggled, but then it all just starts to relax. And the thing we have to do is be proactive about keeping that, just keep talking about it, just keep rolling it around, keep interacting, and the fog will slowly, fall away. And as that happens, once that sort of denial starts to subside, then the potential of this really opens up. And that's when it becomes really exciting, because then you can see a way out. There is a way out of all this upset and pain that's going on in the world and inside us. But anyway, the trick is, it's the Van der Post quote about hasten slowly. You just have to go at your own pace, but keep going, keep being proactive, and you will see the potential of this. And it is beyond, like, I never thought in a squillion years before I came across this that the world looked pretty bleak to me, and now it just looks incredible. So anyway, yeah, that was. I did love what you said too, Alex, just really briefly, because there was a line, I had to write it down because I was trying to remember, but Alex said something like, when he was talking about resignation, really importantly, he said something like in that little, sorry, I'll just explain. Alex did a little talk that's on our website, on the Melbourne side and on our main site, I think, about resignation. And it's only very short, but it's really precious. And he talks about, getting to this point where, I think you said something, Alex, like, no longer could I bear the imperfections within me. And that's like, that is the dark night of the soul. Like, that's when you're sitting there facing down the human condition with nowhere to go. And we've never had a choice until now, now that we've got this understanding, but we've never had a choice but to resign, but to take up this false world that our little boy, little girl inside us just doesn't want to go anywhere near, but had no choice but to go there. So anyway, anyone who's really interested in that, obviously Jeremy's explanation's terrific, but Alex has got a good little spiel on that as well.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah, so I wanted to add, I couldn't help but notice like the people Jeremy was talking to. I really love this talk because they're coming from the general public, and they have different background, different approaches. They're differently open to this, and I could totally sympathize with that young man on the left that was very skeptical. Like, I remember I had seen this video before, like in the beginning when I started scrolling the videos on the web page. And when he asked that question about, or he made that statement about, so we're all in denial. So you're putting us into categories. And I remember, it's getting really interesting now because back then I was so like, okay, I can really relate to this, like to this kind of skepticism, and was very like, I couldn't wait for the answer to come and how Jeremy would lay it out. And it's just so wonderful to see how the way he explains everything, he just standing on this solid ground. And there's no, like, in other conversations, you can absolutely notice, feel, and see how people start defending themselves and their theories. Like there's a defense mechanism, like a lot of emotion. But here, this is all. It's all that it's going smooth. It's all calm, and it's really rational. So, and like he's saying, like, now we're the rat in the cage. So, and this is all science, and this is not me saying this. Like this is all backed up, and this is solid. And you have to go and see for yourself, and really to get the head around this. And okay, like this is about me. This is about us, and we have to go see for ourselves. And for sure, I'm very sensitive about like words. Like we all are right now, because without even knowing the context, we hear certain words and we're like, there's all the red lights going on, oh, this word or that word, without knowing the context. But this is really, you need to start thinking. Like this is a call to start thinking, like use your brain. Everything is laid out, and you can go, you can take every step. I take you by the hand, we go all the steps together, and you can check it for yourself, like if this is true or not. And I just love it.
It's such an important point, Norma. Yeah, I totally agree. Because we are just standing on safe ground, like you said, solid safe ground, and this is all logical, biological, rational information. So yeah, I was skeptical too, and fair enough. There's so many, it's such a muddied pool of, deluded charlatans as they're described, and someone like Jeremy says in that talk, if someone's claiming to save the world, like you should be skeptical,
Yeah.
But we are on, it's a really good point. And we are, but this is all logical, as you said, and we can and we must verify it for ourselves. We are a conscious thinking mind, and we need brain food, not brain anesthetic. Another, quote that Jeremy uses a lot. And this is the ultimate brain food. And yeah, I love, Tone brought up that becoming accustomed to the light, because it's so true. We've had to live in denial for so long, and we are so necessarily insecure and defensive, and so it is, lots of things feel like a criticism at first. And it reminded me actually of that recent post on the group by Chris Ojari. She goes through her wonderful story of coming across this and feeling so criticized at first, and realizing finally that no, this is not a criticism. Yes, I'm upset, but I'm good. It's such an amazing realization, because we've lived, under siege with that. We're so under siege by that fundamental, deep pain that's so deep in our heart. And her journey too was so interesting, because she talks about all the false things, the false starts, the buoyancy aids that she calls them, and how I just thought it was amazing when she talked about how stressed and exhausted that she still feels after all those things that she tried. And what did she say? Even like after doing all her stress relieving techniques, she was so exhausted by her every day, and it still hadn't relieved her stress. It was just so, and all of a sudden she's come across this and has absorbed it enough to really hear that the significance of the defense of our upset, and she's sort of on her way. But anyway, it's just such a good point.
That's the thing. Just following on from that, I think anyway, like with resignation, it's such a it's an incredible thing to understand, like, because there's all this mess and complication in your life. You know what I mean? Like, so there's all kinds of explanations for everything, and you know, you've got a lot of things going on. You've made decisions in your life about how things are and how the world works, and you know, you start to, you know, as soon as you resign, you sort of start putting your blocks in place, and it's all set out, and you set out the way you're going to even dress and whatever, and what you want to project onto the world, and it's all sort of you get this whole sort of system, and everyone's basically, everyone who's resigned is in this agreement to it, you know, and like that's how Jeremy's describing it. But the beauty of resignation and understanding resignation, see, it's this moment when you're 15, like Jeremy says, is this moment where you go from, look, am I good or am I bad? Am I good, am I bad? And it's this deep depression, you know. Am I this evil, awful, despicable, vile, you know, am I a virus, you know? Should I just get rid of myself? And the answer is no, I've just got to block that out and I can never think about it ever again. And then you go and you start, you know, I know for me, it's literally the next day, and it was just girls, football, drinking, career. And that's what you're doing. And you're just out there, and, you know, and when you're young, it's all about adventure, and off you go, and you might go overseas or, you know, whatever it is. But so you've got all this sort of stuff that you do, but what happens is it's all starting on that one day, and all the madness starts on that one day. But the beauty of it, when you come back, right? So we've now got understanding of the human condition. It's all explained. So we know, you know, look, you come into the world, you're expecting unconditional love. You then don't get that. Then you settle down at 12, you try to explain why. Then you resign, and then you go off on this mad trip, right? And it's just crazy, selfish, just all out for wins. I don't give a stuff about anybody else. I just need to win. I want to look good, and I'm just going to prove I'm good. That's all I'm doing now. But the beauty is, look, when that wants to stop, all of that, everything you tried, everything, all your bits and pieces, all the shirt wearing and the posturing and the little twang in your voice and the whole thing, all the blocks in your life that you had going that was set up for your little castle of fame to protect you from the human condition, to protect you from that whole, you know, deep, dark depression inside yourself. It's just a castle of cards. The whole thing is just a ridiculous charade. And yes, that's upsetting. It is totally upsetting that a carpet is pulled out from under you, you know, or the rug or whatever the saying is. But and it's just all of a sudden it just woof, and the whole thing just looks ridiculous. But the beauty of that is that all of us, it's just hang on a sec, just wait, don't lose your shit here, Tony, or you know, it's all right. There's a good reason why that is all mad. It's okay that that's all mad. There was no other way. I had to do that. You know, it's madness or suicide, or go and, you know, get cheap wins, be selfish and egocentric and all the rest of it, resign. But coming back to it, you can calm down and say, look, I've been mad since that one moment. And essentially I'm starting again. So it's literally like that. That's not wasted. That's part of my that's my contribution, if you like, to the heroic search for knowledge all those years. And now that I understand the human condition, I'm putting that aside. I can just lay it at rest. I can, and like Jeremy describes it, as putting it all in a golden suitcase of just the human condition afflicted part of your life. And you can put it all in there safely now. It's okay. And you're going to be, and I know from personal experience, you're going to be addicted to it all. You're not going to want to put it all in the suitcase. There's parts of it are going to be much, much harder than others. But that is actually, what you start to understand more and more as you understand the human condition more and more, and realise that it really does unlock everything, and it makes all of this stuff that you're doing over here futile, that you can put it all away, that you can finally put it down, that you can leave it behind. And it's not, you know, what you think originally is that I can't possibly give up all this good stuff. This is everything that's propping me up. This is my life. This is me. Everything that's good about me is over here. But it's actually not. There's a real person that once you put all that, you know, resigned sort of madness down, and let you know, the information, if you like, the explanation of it, just look, that's all taken care of. Once that goes down, then you can actually start to be real. You are become a real human being, you know, for the first time, you know, since you had to desperately and, you know, had no choice but to give it up. So you died. You effectively give up your mind. You just say, I can't think anymore about anything real. I've got to put it down. I've got to leave it alone, and I've got to go and resign. But you can come back. Now you can think of real things. And you can, like Jeremy said on that video. I mean, I'm still a completely messed up, sort of hopeless, egocentric human in many ways, right? But I know with full certainty that I can leave all that to the side, all my egocentricities and resigned madness, and I can come and I can now live a true life with true understanding of what the world is about. And that is utterly magnificent, because and that's what, you know, finally we're able to have real conversations where I can feel, or start to feel at least anyway, I know where everybody else is. I know that everybody else's true selves is where my true self is. And they are looking for love. They're looking for empathy. They're looking for true connection. And we want to talk about real things. We want to be able to go and not just pretend that we like, you know, sitting and looking out over the valley and there's this absolutely magnificent view with the sun rising and the blue sky in the background. But actually feel it, allow yourself to feel it and not be confronted and not to, you know, run away from those things. You can start to experience the world. You can start to feel and experience, you know, integrative meaning. Like, and that's not God or weird, you know, deity anymore. There's something real. There is a you know, a meaning to existence, and that we can start tapping into it. We can understand it. We can see the whole world is built on integration, and I know integration. I can start feeling integration. I can start feeling love, you know, and that's absolutely drop dead, staggeringly, unbelievably good. You know, yesterday I was a villain that was out here kicking heads, trying to make a fortune, being a legend, you know, trying to bloody, you know, find women, whatever it was. It's just crazy, burnt out horror, really. And today I'm living with true meaning, true understanding. You know, being my true self, being the person that was always underneath, always just waiting there, wanting to be acknowledged. And now I can finally be that person and start to, you know, come to life, true life. And that's, it's too much, really, understanding the human condition, and being able to get on that journey. You know, we're too lucky. Like, for 2 million years, we've got to just keep remembering every single generation, they were born, and I mean, they only started resigning, I think it was 11,000 years ago, but let's say for 11,000 years, every generation has worked and resigned and tried to find knowledge for us for this moment. So it's up to us to actually see this through. We are the most burnt out generation ever. We're absolutely, the walking dead. But we actually get to do what I'm sort of trying to describe anyway, how bloody good it is to not have to resign, not to leave resignation behind, come back, be true people. And I'm not saying I'm totally fixed or anything else. I just know the truth now, and I can live as much as I can, as much as I'm able to find freedom in the understanding now, and where I've come from, where I'm going, what's going on. As much as I can live in that meaning, I can live a true life. And obviously, in a few generations, if I do my bit and I give this information to the coming generations, they are truly going to be free. They're not going to have to ever resign. I'm going to, I'm going to be part of the group of adults that sit down and say, look, you do not have to resign. The problem is not you. There is this great story, the human story that we've all been through, and, be able to describe it to them. They won't have to resign. They won't have to hate themselves. They won't have to live in shame like I had to, because nobody's there to talk. Like, everyone had to, and no one can talk to you. No one can explain it for you. And that's what everyone's saying. But Jeremy just did that in that 1 hour, and it's just the most fantastic thing. So again, I'm sorry.
I'm going to cut you off on the sorry. It really is, Tone. I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal that the great silence is broken. Jeremy has broken that silence, and we can have these honest and real discussions. And as you say, the most important thing is that we can, have these honest and real discussions with the more innocent, with each other, of course, but the more innocent in society, children, more innocent races, we can finally, talk about where all this upset and madness was coming from, and they won't have to, as you say, suffer as victims to the great silence of the human condition. It's just been the most horrendous situation, and it's all just so compassionate, because resignation was just, as you said, a tool to keep depression at bay, and it's been such an amazing tool for that. Like, humanity would not have got here without that incredible defense that we had. We are the walking dead, psychologically dead, but we got here, we made it, and it is the most heroic, amazing story ever. But it's so preoccupying. It is a total dead, preoccupied state, when you are 100% all the time trying to prove yourself. And to be able to drop that now, like you said, because it's all over, it's obsolete, that our strategizing, our egocentricity, our selfishness is obsolete now. It has been brought to an end because the human condition is solved, and that's an entire race can change from selfishness to selflessness from the first time. And it's just like, Jeremy writes in Freedom, it's actually the biggest party this world's ever seen. It's so exciting. Arm in arm, here we come across the horizon, to freedom. We are free, and it's just phenomenal. There's a couple of good comments that have come through. I just thought I'd read a couple. Greg said, first time I've heard honesty and truth on a Saturday night. Ben said, great to see some logic with great arguments touching such an important topic. Good on you, Ben. And Kim, lovely to have heard this and all the sharings, especially in these conditions. And John said, I did live that horror, and now I could never imagine sitting right here, right now, and facing people who did and do feel the same. Yeah, we're certainly dealing with the real thing now, John, and we really are out of here as a species.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful time.
Well, I mean, please, does anyone else want to say anything? I mean, we probably are getting to a bit of the time, but I don't really care. I'm having a good time, but we can wrap it up if there's nothing more.
Yeah,
really,
you go.
Sorry.
You go, Tone.
I was just going to say really briefly, was that we do get a lot of questions, or when we're talking to people or whatever, about, you know, how do we talk about this with children and that type of thing. And the answer to that was in that talk as well. When Jeremy was talking about Robert Cole, that psychiatrist that sort of broke all the rules when that boy's there that he just couldn't reach. I just thought it's just such an incredibly powerful thing, because when I'm a parent, there's other parents, obviously that have got this understanding, and it's the first thing that, it's a hugely confronting problem, because they're going, well, I'm a parent, and then you start to hear this, and you go, geez, hang on, it's my fault. My kids have turned out the way, So it can be a very confronting thing, but it's been completely unavoidable. No one's saying parents don't love their kids or anything like that. It's just been unavoidable, the human condition. But the thing in that talk, it's actually a really, really simple answer. And that Robert Cole guy said, I've been there. And in that moment, he broke the denial and the dishonesty around where that boy was living in total isolation. That leading up to resignation, like Tone was talking about earlier, living on an island, and after resignation. But when you're young and you're coming into that time, you don't feel like you can talk to anyone. You don't feel like you can say anything. The whole world's just absolutely terrifying. And to have someone just be able to say, I know, mate, because I've been there as well, is all kids need to hear, and it's that honesty about where we've been and how upset we are, not in it just in a matter of fact way. It was inevitable. It was incredibly heroic, as everyone's explained. The Adam Stork story is a hero story. But like everything with this stuff, you can get, I'm just using that I just found it really powerful hearing that again. I mean, I've heard it a million times, and every time you hear it, it gets a million times more powerful, and just like all the information. But I just thought I'd mention that one, because that's what kids need, is just look, I'm a mess, mate, but it's all okay now. I can talk about it if you want, but we can actually, the real thing is we can talk about it, and we don't bury it, and that's what's going to help. That's what helps save the world.
And even to add on that, like, for me, being able to understand the human condition, it just gave me the utmost compassion, and actually I could truly love my parents, and because I could compassionately understand them, that they have lived through the depths of hell and managed to raise a family, and then like that's ridiculous, so if anything, all the kids are actually just going to feel so compassionate towards the adults, from hating the adults and from not being able to trust them, to be able to understand where they have come from, through this 2 million year journey. So yeah, we'll just be feeling the most compassion towards our parents.
Yeah, beautiful, Alex.
Well done.
Yeah, it's really seeing the child in your adult parents, isn't it?
Yes.
And seeing that hurt child in your adult parents, and seeing that come back to, that connection coming back. I just love that. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. Love it. I love everything that everybody's saying. It's so good to hear. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful.
Yeah, seeing the child, but also, seeing the upset in a different light, because we can see it for the absolute heroic, beautiful state that it is. It is obsolete and we can move on, but it got us here. We had to become upset, and it's truly like one of the most beautiful paragraphs in Freedom is where Jeremy says, it's out of reach for all time how courageous humans have been in this 2 million year journey. It's we'll be on our knees for a long time in the future, in deep gratitude that that we did march into hell, and it was hell for a heavenly cause. We can, only because of all the generations and us included, can we move on to this new world of understanding that's free and wonderful, and everyone's reconciled and everything explained.
Yeah, the courage of children. Jeremy does, everyone probably would have seen it, but Jeremy's got this drawing. It just says, "Arise to a child," for displaying, unbelievable courage or something along those lines. But it's actually what helped. One of the things that, because the shame that is in you, it just runs so deep. It's just, it will never leave me. I know in my lifetime, it's too embedded, and as I mean, you can do a lot of therapy and go back and deal with a lot of stuff now that the human condition is solved. But I just know it's so deep in there. But the point about it, the point that I was wanting to make is, what helps me the most is just, seeing that child within me, having to play out that Adam Stork story, where he's sitting on the log and he knows what he has to do, kind of thing. He has to sort of, defy his instincts. He's got to get on with life. He has to keep trying. And that means and as a child, already know that it's going to be hell, but you just have to do it. And I just find, when you feel how courageous that every child that ever lived, has been to do that and to overcome that and to sort of just stand up and just, in the face of that, no, I'm good and I'm going to get on with it, and I'm going to help do my part searching for knowledge, and we're going to get out of this someday, sometime, someplace. That's what every child's done. It's just so amazing that humans, it's just unbelievable.
It certainly is.
Anyway, so it's exciting where we're up to. Oh, honestly, people are going to be just running down the streets with their, kids are going to be just, I just imagine it all the time, they're just going to be running around just going, oh goodness. It's so exciting. Just totally free. I mean, we don't have any idea, but I can't wait to see, because the children, you can even see it now. That's why children are so absolutely magical, like I've got these couple of young nieces, and they're not old enough to be affected like hugely by the human condition. They're still sort of just bouncing around. They're happy, and just everything's a joy, and something is new here. And imagine when those children just feel the whole, because at the moment there's just this absolute weight on the whole of society. This just angst, incredible angst. It's just so oppressive, and we don't even know it's there. We get up in the morning, we try and be sort of happy and get going, have a coffee, whatever. But it'll be good when that angst cloud's just, whew, and the kids, they know it. They're not that they'll be excited and just free. Anyway, it's exciting to think about.
It is so exciting to think about.
Imagine that.
I'm just so happy that we can talk about it, that we have the possibility now to talk about all this. It's really liberating.
Absolutely, Norma.
We can have this conversation. about like the biggest elephant around. Like there's no bigger elephant. It's just, and then we can talk about it and not like pretend it's not there. I'm really thankful for that. Really, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's world saving.
That just gives us so much meaning. Like I just think about like from, you know, living that resigned existence and trying to find some sort of meaning in something, your job, you know, and convince myself that I'm changing the world through whatever I'm doing, and then being able to know that supporting this project, I'm going to help provide a future where no kid will have to die a million deaths like we all have. And every human, you know, adults, different races, children, whatever, are just going to be completely at one with each other. And that's just, oh my God, that's so good. that is something to live for. That is something to live for.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, all reconciling. All I was going to say is I've got a little taste of that on the screen because, you know, Alex is so young and others of us are so old, and, you know, we're all here together, you know, and variously we're all different ages, and we're all here together reconciled. Our minds are reconciled. We're reconciled with each other, and as a species we're reconciled. It's phenomenal healing power of this information, that we can even talk to each other, you know, like Norma said, you know, I mean, goodness, there's no way I would be able to relate to you or you to me in a human condition afflicted situation. This wouldn't happen. But this does erase all barriers, all boundaries. Yeah, it's just such a new free world. We don't want to go, do we?
Right, well, we better wrap up unless anyone's got anything else. Well, sorry.
No, that was great, mate. Everyone, that was just fantastic.
Yep.
It was.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. I hope you got something out of it, and we'll see you next time.
And if anyone's watching and wants to get on the line, have a chat about any of this, just drop us a line. It'd be great to chat.
It certainly would.
Yep. Okay. All right.
Bye.
See you later.
Thanks a lot. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye everyone.
Bye.